everybody. Welcome to the I'm a month ahead of myself, the October webinar for Red Green Axis Exposed. My name is Dan Ramada and my partner,
Jim Simpson. Hey, everybody. Good to see you.
How's everybody doing this evening? So we have an excellent guest waiting in the wings for you, Trevor Loudon. And as normal, we're going to start out with a quick presentation, a little PowerPoint that I run through just to let you know, especially new people, who indeed we are. We are Red Green Axis Exposed. Again, Dan Ramada, Jim Simpson, our partner Bev Goldstein has the evening off. She's not with us. We shine the light on radical Marxists, socialists, communists, technocrats, in other words, BLM, Antifa, the Democratic Socialists of America, RevCom, etc., and the Muslim Brotherhood groups. We haven't forgot about them, even though we haven't talked about them much this year. And they're enablers in both political parties, I might add, who are part of the fundamental transformation of our country. RGA's mission this year is to expose Silicon Valley censorship, that's something else we've done, and to show how through the acceptance and implementation of sustainable development, Islamization of the United States advances. We have done this through monthly webinars. We've had the Google whistleblower, Zach Voorhees, immigration specialist, Maria Espinoza and Brandon Darby. Maria's with the Angel Moms, the Remembrance Project. Brandon Darby, of course, from Breitbart, Cartel Chronicles. Citizens for Free Speech. Both this presentation and the Google presentation all talked about censorship. Patrick Wood, who's been with us before, a technocracy expert, and our local friend, Bob France, who's on the Salem AM network, works closely with us. Probably one of the most important webinars of the year was with Catherine Engelbrecht back in May from True the Vote. Catherine says there are at least 350 lawsuits pending already based on the election. So we expect election chaos from the election, of course, all the way maybe up until January and beyond. In the summer, we had Alex Newman, talked about the deep state, followed up with an excellent presentation from Brad Johnson about the politicization of the intel agencies. And of course, John Graves was our last one in September about why it's so important for Christians to get out to vote, get them registered and get to vote, and how he got people to do this. So they were all great webinars. And if you'd like to see any of these recordings, all you got to do is email us at RGA, which stands for Red Green Access, at eaglefiremail.com, or you can find a link to these webinars on the bottom of all of our emails. It's in blue and it says Red Green Access Exposed Webinars. We do not have a website, but we have the recording stored on a server, and that link will take you to the server where you can see any of these previous presentations. Tonight's guest, as I mentioned, is Trevor Loudon. Back in spring of 2016, I'm thinking it was April, we brought him through 4 cities in the state of Ohio. And of course, we had him on a webinar last July with Bishop E.W. Jackson. Trevor, as I told him before we came on this evening, I consider our good luck charm. He told our crowd of about 300 people that night in Broadview Heights, Ohio, and every other city that we had in Ohio, that we had better elect Donald Trump and not elect Hillary Clinton. And he shared why with his excellent movie at the time, Enemies Within, of course, book of the namesake, the same namesake, about the Red Green Axis, basically. He also pointed, that movie talked about the Muslim Brotherhood in the Obama administration. Remember these characters? Mohammed Al-Abari was in the Department of Homeland Security, Imam Muhammad Majid as well. They're the people responsible for the purge and for other policy blunders by the Obama administration. The question is, will Kamala and Joe put the band back together again? And notice I put Kamala first. There's a reason for that. I'm going to show you 2 short videos of Joe Biden pandering to Muslims. He actually says, inshallah, he says, he's going to teach more Islam in schools, or wish that we taught more Islam in schools. Stop the Muslim ban on day 1 and make the Muslims part of his administration. So if you bear with me, we'll just get to these real quick.
To see it, and you'll get to see it. But let me just tell you, see it. And you'll get to see it. But let me just tell you, Chris, let me just tell you something.
Thank M. Gates and the PAC for endorsing my campaign. I wish we taught more in our schools about the Islamic faith.
To see it. But let me just tell you.
Okay, now that's one. Let's go to the other one.
All come from the same root here in terms of our fundamental basic beliefs. And I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, for being engaged, for committing to action this November. You're doing what's that's never been done before. You're registering and turning out 1 million Muslim voters this November. It matters. Your voice is your vote. Your vote is your voice. Muslim Americans' voices matter. I don't have to tell any of you that this is the most important election in modern American history. Muslim communities were the first to feel Donald Trump's assault on black and brown communities in this country with his vile Muslim ban. That fight was the opening barrage in what has been nearly 4 years of constant pressure and insults. I'll be a president who seeks out and listens to and incorporates the ideas and concerns of Muslim Americans on everyday issues that matter most to our communities. That will include having Muslim American voices as part of my administration. If I have the honor of being president, I will end the Muslim ban on day one. Day one. And I'm here today to ask you to join me in a fight to rip this poison from our government root and stem, or as the famous case said, root and branch, starting by making Donald Trump a one-term president this November. But I'm not just asking for your support because the alternative is unthinkable. I want to earn your vote, not just because he's not worthy of being president. I want to work in partnership with you to make sure your voices are included in the decision-making process as we work to rebuild our nation. We can't just build back to where we were before Donald Trump took office. We have to build back better.
Inshallah. He actually said it. You heard him, and it kept playing over and over. And it's not just a mistake. His campaign acknowledged, and it was online. You could find it in several locations. They acknowledged that he did say inshallah, meaning God willing. You heard him say he wants to teach more Islam in schools. He wants to stop the Muslim ban. Of course, it's not a Muslim ban. Otherwise, it would ban all 57 Muslim countries. It's not. It's a jihadist ban is what it was laid out to be. And make him part of his administration. So when we ask, will he put the ban back together? Meaning, will he have the Muslim Brotherhood as part of his administration? We think so. Also, at the end of that video, he talked about build back better. Build back better is actually a phrase or a terminology used by the United Nations. Even Boris Johnson is saying this over in the UN. So it's part of, or it's otherwise known as the global reset or the great reset, whatever you want to call it. Look that up. You can follow it on the World Economic Forum, as we've mentioned. It all talks about UN Agenda 2030 and sustainable development. And I'll remind you of this. I've talked about this several times in the past. Obama, on his farewell tour, he was with Angela Merkel. I'll never forget he said this, that the election of Donald Trump is simply a bump in the road. We remain steadfastly committed to sustainable development. So what does sustainable development actually mean? Well, we got the puppet master, George Soros, and the rest of the elites that go to Davos and determine all these different policies that the elites want to instill upon the minions around the world. Open borders, okay? Mass Muslim immigration. Censorship, you won't be allowed to talk about that or any of it. Voter fraud continues, of course, and then God knows what else. Amnesty, which you heard Obama, or which you heard Biden, really Obama, that's a Freudian slip. It's going to be Obama 2.0 basically this term if Biden and Harris get in there. Amnesty will legalize thousands of refugees, almost entirely Muslim, and these people are future recruits for the Muslim Brotherhood. So you wonder how sustainable development helps to bring about the continued Islamization of the country. This is how it will do it. Tonight's guest is Trevor Loudon. spoke the White House Reds. And with that, let me bring in Jim.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, everybody. Good evening. Great to be with you again. And tonight, I'm really pleased that we can bring you my good friend, Trevor Loudon. Trevor, as some of you may know, has been researching the left in the United States for over 30 years. And Trevor is not from this country. He is a New Zealander, and but he recognized early on that if the United States is taken over by the communists, as they intend to do, that the rest of the world would be lost, including his beloved New Zealand. So it was sort of enlightened self-interest that drove him to begin his deep study of communist infiltration into the United States government and elsewhere. And he's written a number of really good books. The first one, The Enemy is Within. If you don't have it, you should get it. The second one was Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. And his latest, well, of course, then there was the Enemies Within movie, which features yours truly prominently, fairly prominently. So, of course, there's a extra reason you should buy it, but never mind that. His latest, White House Reds, talks about the communist connections of every single Democrat presidential candidate. And he's going to talk about a lot of that stuff tonight. He's going to talk about Kamala Harris's connections to Reds and a lot of other topics. Trevor is really a national treasure for all of us. He lives in the United States now and travels widely talking about these issues. And I think he's the foremost expert in this country on the communist infiltration of the United States. And I will just use this short opportunity to tell you that this election is the most important election in our lifetimes, maybe ever. And if we don't re-elect President Trump, the fundamental transformation of America is going to be completed by the Harris-Biden administration. And Joe Biden is really just a figurehead. The man can't think for 5 minutes on his own. His debate performances were fueled by drugs, so he could keep his mind and not lose it, although he still did lose it occasionally. Kamala Harris, the most radical leftist member of the US Senate, will be the de facto president of the United States. And if you thought things were bad under Obama, you just wait. Things could not be worse. Every single person in this country cares about the future of our country, needs to vote. If you are not registered to vote, you can go to millionvoices.org and do so. Take the pledge to vote that they have there and vote, because never has it ever been so important as it is this year. So without further ado, let me bring on Trevor, and I'll let you take her from here. Trev, come on in. There he is.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Sure can. And I will mute my, get rid of my video and mute my voice so that we can focus on Trev. Take it away, Trev.
Well, thanks very much, Jim. Thanks very much, Dan. Tonight, I thought I would talk about China's war in the United States. Not on the United States, in the United States. They've been working inside this country for some time to destroy it to their advantage. So Jim alluded to Kamala Harris. Now, I'll start with her because I think she's important. She will be the next president if Joe Biden is elected. She's only one heartbeat and about 2 brain cells away from becoming the president he is elected. So, you know, Donald Trump said a while back, he said that if Joe Biden is elected, he will sell the country to China. And he couldn't have picked a better helpmate or henchman to do it than Kamala Harris. Now, according to the Washington Post, she's a moderate Democrat, even though her voting record is to the left of both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. But that's not the worst of it. Now, to understand Kamala Harris, you've got to go back to her parents. Her father was a Jamaican economist. He's still alive. Her mother, who died some years ago, was a cancer researcher from India, both extreme leftists. They belonged to a group called the Afro-American Association in Berkeley in the 60s. They supported Castro, they supported Che Guevara. Two members of that group split off and set up the Black Panther Party, the pro-Chinese, terrorist, Maoist, communist group that is the model for today's Black Lives Matter. Now, Kamala Harris was a student radical at Howard University in Washington, D.C. She then went back to the Bay Area to get connected with politics and start her legal career. And she hooked up with Willie Brown, which caused a bit of a scandal because Willie Brown, who became the mayor of San Francisco, a big-time Democrat in the Bay Area, he was 60 at the time and she was 30. And they got a few tongues got wagging, but, you know, and Willie Brown gave her a couple of jobs. She earned $400,000 over 5 years for, you know, one meeting a month type of thing. And but nobody talks about the fact that Willie Brown was and always has been a communist. He was elected with the help of the communist Hallinan family. He was financed by a Communist Party member named Carlton Goodlett, who won the Lenin Peace Prize. And he was still openly supporting, endorsing under his own name, Communist Party events in the Bay Area at least 5 years after his affair with Kamala Harris. Today, he and Dianne Feinstein, they were both on the fringes of the Communist Party together in the 1960s. He and Dianne Feinstein have basically given San Francisco to Communist China. They're China's best friends in the area. So, you know, she moves past Willie Brown. She becomes a district attorney in San Francisco. She mentors a young woman called Latifah Simon. Now, Latifah was a young black woman, and now who had no college education, no nothing. Kamala got her through college and got her moving through the radical left in San Francisco. She now serves on the president of the board of the Akonadi Foundation, a left-wing board in San Francisco, and serves on the Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority and has been chairman of that group. Well, when Kamala Harris picked up young Latifah Simon, she was part of a youth employment project, and all the other board members of that project were members of STORM, standing together to organize a revolutionary movement. That's Van Jones, Cindy Wisner, Adam Gold. All of them were Maoist communists, but Kamala Harris picked her up, got her where she is today. It turns out Latifah Simon is best friends with Alicia Garza, the founder of Black Lives Matter. So Latifah Simon, Alicia Garza, and Kamala Harris form this little set. They're reliving the Maoist Black Panther days of the 60s. Now, the man who actually got Kamala Harris elected was a guy called Stephen Phillips, a very, very prominent Democrat, author of a New York Times bestseller, and one of the richest men in the Bay Area. He started out as a young black law student at Stanford in the 80s, very active with the League of Revolutionary Struggle, a pro-Chinese communist group. In the early 90s, he led the League of Revolutionary Struggle into the Democratic Party, several hundred of them. And he married into the Sandler family from San Francisco, the Golden West savings and loan fortune. They sold that's a $2.2 billion fortune, half of which has been dedicated to feeding the left-wing candidates, organizations, and the Democratic Party. Steve Phillips is part of the Democracy Alliance with George Soros, Norman Lear, and Tom Steyer, 150 left-wing billionaires who are basically paying for the revolution in this country. And Steve Phillips worked in communist circles with Maya Harris, Kamala's sister at Stanford. By the way, he probably knew their father at Stanford too, Kamala and Maya's father, because he was an openly Marxist economics professor at Stanford, Donald Harris. He was recruited as a Marxist because they didn't have enough Marxists on the staff at the time. Can you believe that? And so Steve Phillips helped Maya Harris's husband get a job in the Obama administration as number 3 in the Justice Department under Eric Holder. He knows the Harris family very well. Steve Phillips used his money to get Kamala Harris elected to DA from San Francisco, Attorney General for California, and U.S. Senate for California, and now he's trying to get her into the White House. Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, his firm deals largely with Communist China and has Communist Party of China members on its board. Kamala Harris owes her career completely to pro-Chinese communists, every single step of the way. So the other thing Steve Phillips did in 2010, he got his, 2008, he got $10 million together and did big voter registration drives in southern states. And that is what got his friend Barack Obama ahead of Hillary Clinton. He also elected his Stanford comrade Cory Booker to the Senate from New Jersey. He almost elected the communist, his protege, Stacey Abrams, to the governorship of Georgia in 2018, and almost elected another protege, another Marxist, Andrew Gillum, to the governorship of Florida. So he's got a lot of influence. What he's doing, it's rerunning the Rainbow Coalition strategy of the 80s. Steve Phillips was part of Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition that was all about getting the progressive whites and with the minorities, progressive blacks, progressive Latinos, progressive Asian Americans, Native Americans, gays, environmentalists. So you had all the colors of the rainbow. Well, that's the strategy that is now dominates the Democratic Party. It's what got Obama elected. It was a completely Maoist strategy. The Jesse Jackson's campaign was completely controlled by the League of Revolutionary Struggle, Communist Workers' Party, Line of March, and other Maoist, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, etc. All Maoist communists. So right now, China is working electorally through several states of America. Virginia was very much a reliably Republican state up till 2008. That's the year that Obama won the state. That was orchestrated by a group called New Virginia Majority, which is funded, you'll never guess, by Steve Phillips, partially by Steve Phillips and the Democracy Alliance. New Virginia Majority was run by Liberation Road, the pro-Chinese Communist Party that gave you Black Lives Matter. And that group signed up they do massive voter registration drives. They signed up over 300,000 minority voters and 200,000 ex-felons. They worked directly with Terry McAuliffe, the former governor of Virginia, to legalize 200,000 felons. They actually gave Terry McAuliffe an award at their dinner for doing that. They flipped Virginia completely done by pro-Chinese communists. They've taken credit for it. They're working the same scam in Kentucky, in North Carolina, which is why both those states now have Democrat governors. They're doing it in Tennessee. They are doing it in Florida with their new Florida majority. They're doing it in Arizona, which is why Kirsten Sinema, the Communist Party supporter, is now the senator from that state. And Mark Kelly, the pro-Chinese astronaut, may well be the next Democratic senator. And they're doing it in Texas, which is why Beto O'Rourke came within 3 points of beating Ted Cruz in 2018. They are working the South. Maoism is all about minorities, manipulating minorities for electoral advantage, for violence, for whatever it takes for a revolution. You know, China didn't have an industrial working class. Mao couldn't use an industrial working class for his revolution. He had to use the peasants, the minorities, to do his dirty work for him. And that's what's playing out in America now. This is a war of the minorities. Trump is going to do well across the Midwest, I believe. I think he'll win Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, probably Pennsylvania. Where I am very worried is North Carolina and Florida and Arizona. And that's where the Maoists are working very heavily. You think about it. If you're a Chinese communist and you wanted to bring down President Trump, would you want to risk billions of dollars on a trade war? Or would you want to risk trillions of dollars on a shooting war? Or would you like to spend a few million funding your communist parties in this country to flip southern states and defeat Trump that way? What would you rather do? What's a more practical scenario? Now, so they're doing that. I'll give you a couple more examples of how China is working against America right now. And nobody's talking about this one, but we should. And I'll tell you what, this is a crisis that's coming. Venezuela was once America's richest, South America's richest country. A great economy, very high standard of living. They elected 2 socialists, wrecked the economy, and now 20% of Venezuela's 30 million people are living overseas, many of them in refugee camps in Colombia and Brazil. Mexico and China is working very closely, obviously, with Maduro. So is Russia, so is Cuba. Mexico is 130 million people. They now have a communist president who is allied with communist China. Liberation Road, the pro-Chinese communist group in America that flipped Virginia, is working to keep your borders open and working with the Mexican communists. They say that the key to the American Revolution is Mexico. What do they mean? AMLO, the Mexican president, is a Marxist. He is starting to implement Marxist policies. Mexico's already an economic basket case. What do you think it's going to look like in a couple of years with full-on socialism? Where are 20% of the Mexican population going to go to when they can no longer survive in their own country? Where do you think? And when they start flooding across the border in the tens of millions, which is the plan, who do you want to be president at the time? Joe Biden or Donald Trump? Because that will finish America if there's anything still standing by that time, if Joe Biden is the president. Now, of course, the COVID. In 2019, May, China declared people's war on America. Trump had just put tariffs on Chinese goods. He'd given them a bit of a caning on trade. And Xinhua news agency announced that the response was people's war on America. Now, people don't understand what that means. That means that's a Maoist term. It means every form of warfare short of direct military confrontation. It means economic sabotage. It means counterfeit money. It means drugs, like the 30,000 kids that die in America from Chinese fentanyl. It means espionage, buying your politicians, and it certainly means biological warfare. Now, we know that the COVID came from Wuhan. We know that it was probably genetically engineered and probably deliberately released. The timing of it was beautiful. It was election year, and I contend this would not have happened had it not been election year. Trump had just caned the Chinese on trade. He had stood with the anti-communist candidate in the Taiwanese presidential election who won, and he'd stood with the Hong Kong protesters. The Communist Party of China was losing face. And when you lose face in China, you lose power not long after. You know, the Communist Party of China is basically 800 families. They've got massive problems. They are hanging on to power. They cannot handle 4 more years of this crazy guy in the White House, because if he keeps going and isolates them economically, they will be hung by their own people. Trump has a plan to take down the Communist Party of China, and he must be allowed to implement it, because that would be the greatest boon to the world we can imagine. All that energy and work ethic and ingenuity and talent in China, harnessed towards freedom, harnessed towards good, would be the greatest boon the planet has seen for a long time. But the Communist Party of China understands if they don't take down President Trump, he takes them down. So, you know, so they basically, we know they deliberately spread the COVID because, for one of many reasons, every year in Wuhan, they have a massive New Year celebration, lasts for a whole week, and Chinese come from all over the world to party up. Well, this time, the Communist Party of China, the local authorities asked the Communist Party of China, should we cancel because of COVID? They were told, no, it goes ahead. So Chinese came from California and Australia and France and Britain. They partied for a whole week, went back to their home, and COVID was everywhere. Well, normally when we have a pandemic, the normal situation is we quarantine the sick and we go about our business. We were told we couldn't do it this way this time because the World Health Organization said that there was evidence of asymptomatic transmission, meaning people without symptoms were transmitting, and we didn't have testing, so we'd have to quarantine everybody. Trump was told there'd be 2 million dead if he didn't shut down the economy. He knew he'd get blamed for every dead grandmother between now and the election if he didn't. So he did. Well, they've now walked back the claim that there's evidence of asymptomatic transmission. That's garbage. It doesn't happen. But anyway, we've got to understand the World Health Organization is led by Mr. Tedros of Ethiopia. And if you check out his CV, he's the former leader of that country's pro-Chinese Marxist-Leninist Communist Party. The man is completely in China's pocket. So now we've got a situation where the Democratic Party has formed an alliance with China to wreck the US economy to bring down the president. Brian Dean Wright, a former CIA officer and a Democrat, was on Tucker Carlson a couple of months ago saying, my party, the Democratic Party, is following the Chinese line over COVID, demanding shutdowns. Well, why are they shutting down? Well, it's really simple. Trump's biggest asset was the economy. If he can wreck the economy, that takes away one of his biggest advantages. But it also does something even more serious that nobody is talking about. Obama gutted the US military. While Obama was in power, America was building 9 Navy ships a year, while China was building 60. He cancelled weapon systems. He refused to build and upgrade our nuclear arsenal, which Biden will completely cancel, by the way. He just made a mess of the military. It was back at World War I, World War II levels in many areas. Meanwhile, China was building up, Russia was building up, and they are allies. Never forget that, in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. a political, military, economic pact. And they were building up, and Trump knew when he got into power, we were facing a war and we would probably lose. So immediately started to rebuild the US military budget. But you can only do that on the back of a strong economy. What do you do when your economy's in the toilet? And already 31 Democrats, led by the pro-communist Barbara Lee from California, the woman who's been to Cuba 22 times. The only one close to her is Karen Bass, who was almost Biden's VP, who has been to Cuba 16 times and was actually accused once by the chief police in Los Angeles of smuggling Cuban weapons into East LA to start an insurrection. But she passed the Biden vetting test. Can you believe that? So Barbara Lee has written a letter to the Armed Services Committee demanding huge defense budget cuts in the next budget go-around because of COVID. So if they succeed, and they will succeed if Biden is elected, you'll see massive US defense cuts. And I mean absolutely massive. The Green New Deal is designed to do this, to siphon off so much money that there is no money left for the military. If they succeed in destroying the US military, guess who runs the world from that point onwards? Guess what happens to our freedom and the freedom of everybody? The only thing standing between you and destruction is President Trump and the US military, and the Chinese plan to cancel both of them. So we're just starting to pull out of the COVID, or some states, and we're hit by the riots, all because George Floyd got killed in Minneapolis, right? No, this was planned since at least 2016. The day that Trump got elected, the head of the Freedom Road Socialist organization, Steph Yorick, a pro-Chinese communist, vowed to make this country ungovernable to bring down Trump. In 2019, they set up a group called the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, named after a group of the same name in the 1970s that got the communist Angela Davis out of jail when she was facing accessory to murder charges. And this was a group set up to focus on issues of racism and police brutality. When George Floyd was killed, the Minnesota affiliate of the National Association for Racist and Political Repression, headed by Jess Sundin, the wife of Steph Yorick, instigated the riots. They did it. They take credit for it. I've got it on video, Jess Sundin saying, "You cannot believe the joy we felt as we watched Precinct 3 burn to the ground. I organized for 2 weeks on this." She talks about how the looting and the mayhem and the violence was an integral part of the movement. And it explicitly was not Antifa or right-wing boogie boys or whatever. It was them. She says this in a podcast, takes full credit for it. They are the same people that burnt Kenosha, Wisconsin to the ground. They started riots in Houston, Dallas, Tampa, Tallahassee, Miami and Jacksonville, Salt Lake City, Utah, Los Angeles, the Bay Area, and Milwaukee, Chicago, and several other cities. The people who did the rest of the rioting was another pro-Chinese communist group called Liberation Road. Used to be part of Freedom Road, but they split a few years back. Now, Liberation Road is the group that started Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was started by Opal Tometi, Patrisse Cullors, and Alicia Garza. And we're told it's just 3 chicks sitting around one day, and they're really worried because Trayvon Martin had been killed in Florida, and cops were hunting black kids, and they just thought up a hashtag, and it just sort of went wild, and it just went out of control. It just surprised them. It was a complete Liberation Road operation from start to finish. completely a communist operation. Those three women have ties to former East German communists, to Palestinian terrorists, and the Chinese. Now, Alicia Garza was a student radical in San Diego in the 90s with a young man called Alex Tom, young Chinese American kid. He became the leader of the Chinese Progressive Association in San Francisco. This is like the big acorn of San Francisco, run by Chinese communists. It's very hard to get elected in San Francisco without their blessing, which is why San Francisco is completely run now by communists. It's all done through the Chinese Progressive Association, which is a tool for communist China. They set up a group called Asians for Black Lives, run by Alex Tom, Pam Tao Li, and other leaders of the Chinese Progressive Association. This was the guiding force behind Black Lives Matter. Alex Tom has extensive ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Also, I've got him on tape, I'm releasing it tomorrow, his ties to the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. He talks about how he runs his messaging past the Chinese consulate, his positioning, and the deep ties he has to the Chinese there. He is completely the guiding force, and they are the guiding force behind Black Lives Matter. He went to China in 2013. He took a young woman called Lucia Lin with him, another Chinese Progressive Association cadre. They went to China, met with Communist Party officials, came back. They wrote a manual, a 300-page manual for Black Lives Matter, Marxist. And they also, Lucia Lin and Alicia Garza, went to Ferguson just after the rioting to meet with the Liberation Road cadre who burnt Ferguson, Missouri to the ground. So China has wrecked your economy with a deliberately spread disease. They are building a military to confront yours. They're killing your kids with fentanyl at an alarming rate. They are indoctrinating your kids with their Confucius Institutes and Hollywood. They're buying up your infrastructure, your food plants and real estate companies all over the country. They're buying your politicians, your news media outlets, and now they are burning your cities to the ground, and they're working electorally to defeat your president. And none of this, hardly, is known to the average American voter. And now they're trying to get to defeat your president, the most anti-communist Chinese president you've ever had. And they're doing all of this. But the good news is this: you can buy cheap toasters at Walmart. This is a deal you've been given. Kissinger, the communist globalist, and the idiot Richard Nixon sucked you into believing that if you engaged with communist China, you could woo them away from the Soviet Union. You could draw them into democracy. You could liberalize them and make them like us. Well, you took a country that couldn't threaten the Philippines and turned them into world power that's now working overtime to destroy you. And you're 2 weeks away from giving them the power to do that. What a deal. What a fantastic deal. And you sold out your industry and hundreds of thousands of American jobs to do it. But you can buy cheap toasters in Walmart. Well, President Trump wants to disengage completely from Communist China. He has a plan to destroy the Communist Party of China. He is forming an international alliance to isolate China, to starve the Communist Party of China. You won't have to send troops into China. Their own people will take down the Communist Party if we stop being friends with them and funding them. It's very, very simple. You know, we should have learned from Hitler. American companies funded Hitler. Then American boys got shot with bullets we had helped to produce. The same thing happened with Japan. The same thing happened with the Soviet Union. if we get into a shooting war with China, and we only really will when they have no other option, because they're doing pretty well at the moment, bringing us to our knees. Civil war is the next step. You know, this is the election. The election is communism in China or Trump and a chance at liberty. That's it. And right now, we can see that the left is getting ready to create major chaos the day after the elections, especially if Trump wins. It'll go either way. Either way, they're going to be violent, you know, because they're just going to bully Biden into doing what they want. He will do it anyway, because he's as much of a communist as any of them. If you go into his background, he's not a moderate, never has been a moderate. But anyway, so Trump gets elected. Freedom Road Socialist Organization already talking about the riots they're going to cause. Liberation Road's getting ready. Democratic Socialists of America is getting ready. Workers' World Party's getting ready. Party for Socialism and Liberation's getting ready. Democratic Socialists of America is getting ready. All of the left are getting ready for massive riots. So what you're going to have is you're going to have an election that probably won't be decided on election night, that's going to be fought out in the courts for weeks and weeks. Both sides are going to be completely pissed off. Both sides are going to feel cheated out of a victory. You're going to have massive tension, a drop in the stock market, you know, people calling for Trump to be removed from office, massive demonstrations on the street, a color revolution, just like was done in the Ukraine. You're going to have all this going on, and the communist Chinese are going to be winding it up like you wouldn't believe. What we've seen this year so far is just a trial run for what they're going to do after the election. So everybody needs to get prepared. Everybody needs to get out there tweeting and Facebooking about the color revolution that's coming after the election. We got to win by such a margin that it reduces the power of the left, the moral power of the left to carry this out. So that's where we are in America now. We're in the revolution that me and Jim and others have been warning out for a long, long time. Well, finally, it has arrived. It's on our doorstep. And do we let it roll over us, or do we roll it back and force the left out of power for years? Well, if we do that, we've got to take a lot of very tough steps. And that will come down to the will of the American people and the courage of our leadership to carry them out. So I think I'll leave it at that. You're probably all depressed enough as it is. But I see a lot of hope here yet, because the left has shown its hand, and the left is nowhere near as strong as they make themselves out to be. When they lose this election and we stand strong, that we can make them crumble. But we've got to be very resolute and prepared for what's coming.
Yep.
So I'll call it quits there, and see if there's any questions from the audience, Jim.
Yeah, great. Fantastic, Trev. Wow. And that was some stuff, a lot of that stuff about Harris I did not know. That's really incredible information. And you're exactly right about what they're doing here. And I'm coming out shortly. The list of viewers should take note. I'm going to be coming out with an article this week that describes how Joe Biden has fronted an effort in Guatemala to bring the exact same kind of strategy there that they're trying to implement here, where they are taking over the judicial system, the legal system, and the political system with communists and other extreme radicals. And it's being pushed by a UN organization called the International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala. It is a supra-legal organization, has no, this Guatemalan government can do nothing to stop it. And it is just basically, once it took power and Joe Biden made sure that it stayed in power, it's thrown opposition politicians and anybody else that it doesn't like into jail without a trial. And some of the people waiting for a trial have died waiting, and then subsequently been declared innocent of all charges. And what if that is a small example, small scale example of the exact same thing that they're trying to do here. And we've already seen it with Judge Sullivan against Michael Flynn, and with all of the unconstitutional orders that the various judges placed on Trump's efforts to seal the border, and all of the unconstitutional nationwide injunctions that various courts have imposed against Trump and the administration. And so that's going to, and there's also a component of that. The former president of Guatemala claims that in pushing this organization, Joe Biden also pushed for a contract with Baxter International, which is a pharmaceutical company. And the president claims that Biden has a financial interest in that company. So here we are again with Ukraine, with China, with Russia buying off the vice president, the former vice president, current presidential candidate of the United States. But it's a perfect example of how they're trying to impose communism here. And Guatemala is currently tottering right on the edge. A lot of the people that I've spoken to say it'll never come back, or it can't come back unless they get help from the Trump administration. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And but that was just a fantastic presentation. We've got 8 questions so far. The first one comes from Diane. She asks, if Trump wins, what would you recommend he do the first thing to break the back of the communist Chinese movement to take over the US?
Well, here's what I would do if I was Trump. I would declare an amnesty. This is what I'd do. I'd give a 3-month amnesty for all foreign agents working in America. I'd require every single foreign agent to register with the foreign agents under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. They got 3 months. If they don't do it in that time, they get kicked out of the country or go to jail. Fully prosecuted at the full extent of the law. I would say to every foreign agent or people working for foreign governments in this country, in that 3 months, you've got it. We're going to set up a special body of intelligence officers chosen from trusted intelligence officers chosen from different agencies, a new board. You will apply to that board for amnesty, and you will have to spill your guts completely on all of your networks, everybody you've ever dealt with, and then you can stay in the country, maybe even go under witness protection. That would throw every foreign intelligence agency in the country into complete chaos, because they wouldn't know who's turned themselves in, who hasn't. They don't know at the end of 3 months, are they going to go to Leavenworth for 20 years if they don't turn themselves in? Are they going to leave the country? It would completely screw up the Chinese, Iranian, Russian, Venezuelan, Cuban operations in this country without firing a shot. 3 months, people, you turn yourself in, you register, you apply for amnesty, you spill your guts, or you leave the country in that 3 months. You got to choose.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Okay, Diane also asked, should President Trump tweet that this Amazon Prime won't show D'Souza's movie, but is showing the movie Unfit about President Trump? Wow.
Well, look, that's the other thing. President Trump has got to get very serious about big tech, and there's got to be a massive investigations into the foreign influence in major companies in this country. And that would be partially addressed with the amnesty, because I'm sure Google, Facebook, all these people are effectively working with the Chinese.
Yeah, right.
And this is a national security issue. This is not a civil matter to be dealt with by antitrust laws or stripping of their special status. Because all these companies are allowed to, they cannot be sued in class actions because they have an amnesty from that, an exemption from that because they offer a neutral platform. Well, they don't, and that's got to be dealt with. But before that, we've got to treat this as a national security threat, and there's got to be major investigations into the leadership of these organizations, and people, I believe, need to go to jail for what they're doing.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, the big question is, do they have enough support within the bureaucracy, like, for example, in the Department of Justice, to do anything like that, or for that matter, within the intelligence agencies?
That's why it's got to be a major decapitation of all those agencies the day that Trump gets reelected.
He's
got to get rid of Barr. He's got to get rid of Ray. He's got to just decapitate these agencies several levels down until he starts to get actual action on what he wants.
Well, okay. Another thing too that would be equally or even just as effective, not as an additional movement, would be to cite all those organizations that are funding this, the Ashkenazi, the George Soros groups, the Sandler Foundation. All these groups could be declared continuing criminal enterprises and have all of their assets seized by the federal government as under RICO. And I would like to see that. It's the same problem.
Well, I believe the Communist Party of China will be declared a criminal enterprise too.
Yeah, well.
So that'll make it real hard for them to work with the Communist Party of China.
Yeah.
So yes, all of the above.
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, so Ken says, Trevor's amazing. How does he get all this information? The sources, are they proprietary or open source on the internet? Are you doing research to find that this FBI doesn't have, or is it that they don't care to have it? And why do we allow commie organizations to be tax exempt? Yeah, well, that's sort of part of the same question that I'm asking.
Well, these organizations have been tax exempt for 100 years, and they were investigated in the 30s with the Reese Commission, who found a huge amount of subversion going on, but nothing was ever done. But regarding the FBI has not investigated communists in any serious way since the 1970s. The last time they did it, they arrested 23 men, or they raided the homes of 23 members of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization in Chicago and Minneapolis in 2010. But that was closed down by Eric Holder because, partially I think, because several of them were friends of Obama's.
Yeah, that's right, they were. Yeah.
So
part of the SEIU.
The FBI doesn't investigate communists because they are led by communists.
Yeah.
And also, when you investigate communists, that always leads to Democrats. And that's very politically embarrassing. You got to understand, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee is a Marxist, Jerry Nadler. The chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Benny Thompson, is a pro-Cuban communist. The chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, loves China like a chocolate.
Yeah.
These people are working for the other team. And Trump walked into a 90% completed communist revolution.
Yeah, that's right.
Walked into it, just blindly walked in. I think he had no idea what he was walking into. That I'm a businessman. I'll just give orders. Everybody will do what I say. No problem. And he got resistance that shocked him to the core. I think. Well, I don't think he's going to make that mistake again. I think he understands what the enemy is, and he's not going to allow that to happen again.
Yeah.
Okay. Trevor, if you could see the screen, I have keywiki.org up, as well as trevorloudon.com. Sure.
That picture right there, that is Jess Sundin. She's the woman who burnt Minneapolis. And see Justice for Jamar. That's the Minneapolis affiliate of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. That is the woman who burnt those cities.
Yeah, right, and bragged about it.
Yeah.
Anonymous attendee asks if you've debriefed President Trump, and does Trump get reliable intelligence from the deep state on China?
No, he doesn't. Look, you would get a better briefing here tonight than Trump gets.
That's right. That's right.
You know, Trump's got a few good people around him, but nobody in the Intelligence Committee is giving him anything.
Yep.
Look, the Department of Homeland Security just issued its annual report. It was all about white supremacy. We're in a communist revolution, and there wasn't one mention of Antifa or Black Lives Matter in the whole report. The Republicans on the Homeland Security Committee, Armed Services, and Judiciary get nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
The FBI, if it knows about any of this stuff, doesn't get it. Well, look, Jerry Nadler, the head of the Judiciary Committee, right, member of Democratic Socialists of America, he is the one who got Susan Rosenberg out of jail, the convicted terrorist who killed people.
Yep.
He got her out of jail. Now she's on the board of the fundraising wing of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
So you got all these FBI agents that supposedly out there are looking for the people who burnt America, burnt all these cities. The people who burnt the cities are Jerry Nadler's friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you think the FBI is going to go out and arrest their boss's friends?
Yeah. Right. Yep. Nope. So Diane asked, what is Barr waiting for? And I'll let you answer that. But first, I want to say that I know some folks who know him personally, and his story is, he and maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 other members of his staff are the only people in that organization that are willing to do anything. And they are surrounded by a sea of enemies that do everything they can to impede and thwart whatever it is they're trying to do. I mean, it was actually pretty amazing that Hunter Biden's associates, Devin Archer and the other guy, I can't remember his name, they were actually indicted for crimes. And then Devin Archer got off, but he is recently, an upper court threw out that earlier lower court decision. And so now his arrest and prosecution have been reinstituted. So he's facing criminal charges again. But Hunter Biden, of course, has squirmed out of all that. But Barr has brilliant mind, but he is surrounded by enemies. It's very difficult for him to do more than what he's doing. And I don't, he needs to indict people. They need to charge people. But I think their efforts to do that are being greatly hamstrung by the bureaucracy.
Well, the whole game is to spin things out after the election till Biden's the president, then it all goes away.
Yeah,
it's real simple. It's not, but I don't even think Barr is that great personally. I've my good friend Cliff Kincaid, was not very favourable about Barr back in the 90s when he was sort of a bit of a deep state himself. So whether he's a good guy or not, I can't say. Yeah. But clearly he has not been effective enough. This is the time for busting heads and getting things done.
Yeah.
And, if you can't get it done through your own agency, you set up a group and get it done through someone else, Okay.
Yeah, no, that's right. Trouble is finding somebody who's willing to do it. Carol asks, what is your opinion as to why Trump didn't blast Biden during the last debate about the Hunter emails? And what is your opinion about McConnell's bruising his hands and lips the afternoon before the debate?
I don't know anything about McConnell.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, Trump did bring up the email several times.
Yeah, he did.
He maybe could have done it more forcefully, but I think he handled it pretty well overall.
Yep.
I think there's not many people in America now who don't know about those emails.
Right.
So, Yeah, I think Trump did pretty well.
Is there any, David asked, is there any legitimate pushback organizationally against the communist groups working in the South in the election process?
I didn't get that, sorry, Jim.
Are there any legitimate organizations working against these communist groups across the South in the election?
Well, there are voter integrity groups, but there's no real knowledge. I mean, look, the Republican Party in Virginia still has no idea that their state was stolen by communists.
Right.
The Republicans in North Carolina are facing defeat, have no idea what they're facing. Same in Florida, same in Georgia. They have no clue. Well, who's going to tell them? The media's not going to tell them. The FBI's not going to tell them. They don't go reading communist newspapers, 15 hours a day like I do.
Yeah. Right.
So no, they have no idea.
Jay asks, are you comfortable that Trump and his staff are fully aware of the issues you raised? I don't know. Fortunately not.
No, look, Trump is aware to a large degree. I know that some of my stuff has got through to him. I know that I talk to people who talk to Trump. I know, the fact that he comes out and calls these people communists all the time, Kamala Harris and whatever, and openly talks about communists, I would tend to think that comes from people like me and you, Jim, and others who have raised this issue over a while. I know that they read our stuff, but I haven't sat down and talked to Trump or anything like that. But
Right.
I think he's aware to a large degree, but anything he gets out of the intelligence community is untrustworthy. I think he's flying by the seat of his pants to a large degree, and is just trying to hang on through the election. Then hopefully, I think he's going to be unleashed. And I know that, the gloves are going to be off once that election's over, because he'll have nothing. He doesn't care about world opinion. He doesn't care about public opinion. He wants to leave a legacy in a free America. So I think he'll be very, very resolute as soon as that election's done and dusted.
Yeah, because he won't have another 4 years to have to deal with. He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Have a free hand. So yeah, let's just hope and pray.
Why did the riots happen in election year? Why did the COVID happen in election year? Because Trump's hands were tied in election year.
Yes.
He couldn't respond adequately. You imagine if he sent troops onto the streets in Chicago to deal with the protesters. They would have shot at the police. The police would have shot at protesters. You would have had a dozen dead kids in the middle of the street, and there'd be Kent State times 10, and that would be it. So he's been very smart in how he's handled this, I reckon.
Yes. Basically leaving it to the states with the legitimate reason that it's up to the states under our Constitution to deal with those things.
Yeah. And now you're getting a lot of people in those blue states are not very happy with their governors.
That's right.
And I think Trump has been very wise to follow that approach.
And let them hang themselves with their own rope. Okay, so Ken asks, well, what's in it for them if Biden wins? Even if he left our system alone, he has power to do all the cronies. We can already see he knows how to prostitute himself into hidden accounts. He says, I know that communism has worse income equality and the elites are surely on top, but I think I'm missing how sexy it is for them to screw up the country. They can enrich themselves either way when they're in power. So what's the secret mission? And last, does Trump have well, you already answered that one.
Well, look, it's not about enriching themselves. They've already got enough money. This is about power. This is good versus evil. Why did Satan leave heaven? Because he'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven.
Right.
Paradise Lost, Milton. This is people who are so hating America, so power-driven, so absolutely contemptuous of this country and the Constitution. They just want power, and they don't care if it turns into hell. That's all the better. They'll be doing all right. This is pure power-driven ego, and communism fosters those kind of people.
Absolutely. So Teresa asks, can you lead the effort by contacting POTUS? Well, We're trying, right?
Yeah, there are people, there are things in train that I think will come into fruition after the election. I think this year caught a lot of people by surprise, and they're still trying to get their heads around it. Well, we've got a whole lot more coming up November 4th, no matter which way it goes.
Yep.
And we've got to get through that. So everybody's got to be prepared. We've got to hunker down. We've got to show maximum restraint and maximum discipline, because what the Chinese want more than anything else is a civil war in our territory.
Yep.
And you think an election that is dragged out for months, when both sides feel cheated, when the economy's sinking, when the Democrats are slagging at the president's slagging at them, can you think of a better recipe for a civil war than that one?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what they've been pushing for.
And so we got to show absolute restraint, because if we get into a shooting war, a whole lot of innocent people will die.
Yep.
The first civil war was Christian gentlemen versus Christian gentlemen.
Yeah.
Some in grey uniforms, some in blue uniforms.
Yeah.
And that was horrible enough.
Yeah.
You imagine a civil war on our territory today with no clear lines of demarcation, it would be chaos.
It would be chaos.
Absolute chaos.
And
atrocities everywhere.
Yeah.
And then when it got so bad and we were so worn down, then the Chinese, the Russians, the Venezuelans, and the Cubans would come in to restore order. And what could we do to stop them?
Yep, right. No, exactly. And in fact, Frances Fox Piven said that very thing. She said that, well, if the right thinks that they can beat us with guns, all we need to do once the Civil War starts is invite our friends in. And she was talking about the Chinese communists and the Russians and et cetera.
Yeah.
So Sherry asks, are the Biden disclosures so close to the election enough to secure a victory for Trump? Who knows?
Say that I didn't hear that one.
Are the disclosures about the Biden emails and all that so close to the election enough to help Trump win?
Yeah, I think they're helping him, but it would have been better 2 or 3 weeks ago. Because nearly 40% of the votes have already been cast, I believe. But yes, I think it will help him by a half a percentage. It'll help him in some places to some degree.
Yeah.
But it would have been better had it been a month ago, and if the left hadn't been able to completely squash it.
Kirsten asks, regarding the Chinese communists and other communists who have bought up U.S. infrastructure, i.e. real property, food companies, etc., how do we reverse that? It's a good question.
Well, it's a matter of basically ordering them to sell. There's plenty of cases around the world where governments have come to power and either nationalized industries or forced the companies to sell. And especially if they're foreign-owned companies, you just say, well, we're going to change the law. You're no longer allowed to invest in our country. The Communist Party of China is declared a criminal organization.
Yep.
Out. Go.
Yep.
End of story.
Yep. Sherry mentions, and somebody else brought this up, Karen mentioned it, that Harris is not a natural born citizen. Do you have any view on that?
Well, that may be the case, but it'll have zero impact on the election.
Right.
Look, if it didn't work with Obama, it ain't going to work with Harris.
Right. Gail asks, is the recording of this going to be made available? Yes, it will be. Couple of days down the road. And I've been remiss in issuing swamp reports. So as soon as I got done with this article I'm working on, I'm going to put up the swamp report, and it'll include a link to this webinar. Sherry says, I fear big tech and the media will steal this election. Well, they're sure trying, aren't they? Kirsten,
Well, that's another reason why after the election, big tech has got to be taken apart.
Yep, that's right.
You just take down one of these companies, you put some of their executives in jail.
Yeah.
The other ones would reform themselves pretty
overnight.
darn,
Overnight. Kirsten says, how can the negatives of communism be communicated in K through 12 education school districts? That's part of the long battle that we've got to fight.
Yeah.
restore.
Well, you know, we've got to get control of the education system again. We've got to abolish the Department of Education, return all education to state levels, deregister the teachers' unions completely, get rid of tenure in the universities. We've got to get rid of socialized student loans, and let's get 80% of American kids when they leave school into apprenticeships or trade school.
Or I've always believed that we should resurrect the draft and require everybody to serve 2 years in the military to learn what it is to defend our.
Yeah, I would have no objection to that either. It's done Israel a heck of a lot of good, I can tell you, and Switzerland too. Two of the most stable democracies in the world. They both require compulsory military service. And I can absolutely see the benefits of that.
June says, just found out about GTV, a Taiwan dissident, that he's releasing info, video, and pics of people in government and celebrities who are being threatened by the CCP. Do you know anything about GTV and the dissident?
Yeah, look, is this Miles Go or whatever his name is, or Kwok or whatever? Yeah. I'd have to have a bit more information on that to comment. I'm not sure.
June.
But look, a lot of these things I'm a little bit suspicious of, put it that way.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Anything that comes out of China or is suspect.
What about Michigan? What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, I think John James will very likely win. Well, if it's a fair election, he'll win. I think. Look, I think Trump's going to do well in Michigan, in Minnesota, in Ohio, probably Pennsylvania. I am more concerned about those southern states, the high minority voter states. North Carolina, Florida, Arizona. I think Michigan is going to go well. I think there's a big movement for Trump in the northern Minnesota, the part of the state that normally goes for the DFL. Democratic Farmer Labor Party. So I'm optimistic in those states. I also think we're going to do quite well in California too, you know, especially in the rural areas in Orange County. I think we'll take some seats back there. Look, I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibilities to take back the House at all. I think it's actually quite possible that we'll take back the House.
Yeah, and even improve our margins in the Senate.
Yeah, I think all of that's possible. Look, I think Trump can absolutely win this. You know, in a fair election, yes, he would run away with it. But it's the chaos after the election we got to be prepared for, because the left are going to throw all their toys out of the cot. Simple as that.
Yeah, they've already declared that a Trump victory is illegitimate. They've already declared.
Well, they've said Trump, if he wins, it's a coup.
Okay, so let's see. Jamie asked, how are all the governors directly and indirectly promoting this agenda with their COVID responses? It appears that DeWine in Ohio is playing into the pocket of globalist and leftist agendas by implementing overreaching dictates which are killing our economy and breaking the human spirit, creating government dependence.
Yeah, DeWine is a loser, to put it mildly. He's one of the worst Republicans out there. You look at the real examples of Kirsty Noem in South Dakota, Ron DeSantis in Florida. Open up, get things going. DeWine is a Democrat, you know, just like John Kasich before him. He's just a Democrat with an R after his name.
Exactly.
And the left wants to keep the economy shut down. It's a bit of virtue signaling, you know, to show how great and moral they are. Look, it was a funny example. I spoke to an audience of 300 Republicans in Maury County in Tennessee recently. And we're all under a tent, not a mask in sight. Everybody was happy. Nobody wanted masks. And the governor, Bill Lee, who's a bit of a wimpy rhino, phoned up and said, I'd love to come to the event, but I'm going to wear a mask just to show, you know, just how moral I am. And he was told, well, you'll be the only one that does. So perhaps it's better you don't come, Mr. Lee, Governor Lee. And basically told to take a hike.
Where was that again?
Sorry?
Where was that again?
Tennessee, Maury County, Tennessee. Bill Lee, the governor, Republican governor of Tennessee, who's who thinks he's a conservative, but he's not.
Okay, so an anonymous attendee says, can we eliminate voting before election day? Maybe vote 2 weeks before. So many people are Googling how to change a vote. Is a significant concern for people who believe mainstream media.
So I didn't understand that question.
Yeah, he said, can we eliminate voting before? He's talking about electoral reform. Well, you know, like everything else, electoral reform is a very tall order. Most, you know, each state has its own election laws. So each state has to decide that. And for
well, you know, I don't understand that, because if you're voting in a federal election, why should you not have to conform to federal law?
well,
I can understand.
true.
I can understand in a local election, yes, you vote, you know, your own way.
No, but each state controls how it votes.
I know it does, but I can't see how that should
Well,
be.
you know, we have the National Voter Registration Act, which was the biggest, you know, written by Cloward and Piven, and that has really is what created so much chaos in our electoral system. And that was you know, it was challenged as being unconstitutional, and of course it lost. They lost when they challenged it. Barack Obama was one of the attorneys that fought for its continuance, but it all requires electing people who understand the issues and who are willing to do the right thing. And unfortunately, in the states, most Republicans shy away from that because it's controversial, it creates huge battles, and they don't see a big percentage in doing it. That's the unfortunate reality.
And that's true. But look, you know, if in the next year, 150 people went to jail for 10 years for vote fraud,
Yeah,
well, vote fraud would be a problem much longer.
Yeah, no, definitely would.
Yep. You know, so these things can be dealt with in a federal. You know, the federal government just says we're going to get serious about vote fraud. We catch you, you're going to jail for 10 years. Yeah. End of story.
You can create a federal law, you know, or if there probably one's already on the book, but you could strengthen those.
Yeah.
Anyway, Terry asked, is there any chance the problem with Barr is really Durham? That's a good question.
I didn't hear it, sorry.
Is there any chance that the problem with AG Barr is really the guy that he appointed to investigate all of these things, you know, the attorney Durham?
Well, yeah, it could well be, but that goes back to Barr's judgment, and why hasn't he sacked him if he's not doing what he needs to do?
Right.
The buck stops at the top, doesn't it?
It sure does.
You know, so he chose him. He's been monitoring him. The job hasn't been done.
Okay,
you know, I would be replacing Barr straight after the next election if I was President Trump.
Yeah, you just have to find a better replacement. There aren't a lot of them. William asks, any notion as to what's delaying the issuance of John Durham's report? Is there a deep state angle, or are they possibly angling for maximal prosecutorial impact?
No, it's all delayed to get it past the election so it can be just buried.
Yeah,
it's real simple.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
No, I don't think there's anything more complicated than that.
Well, I'll tell you something. Another angle too is I'm sure I don't know where Durham is politically. I don't think he's a Republican. He was chosen because he's supposedly even-handed and effective, but behind the scenes, I guarantee you, Barr, Durham, and anybody else who is pushing this, prosecutors, investigators, they're all literally having their lives threatened. And
look, I'm sure they are. Yeah. But, you know, look, it didn't take them long to prosecute General Flynn, did it?
No, of course not. That's because the entire...
Or Roger Stone or any of these other guys. That was all done pretty quick, wasn't it?
Right. It was done by leftists.
But why is look, we don't need an even-handed person here now. We need someone who's fair, but will fight, and is fearless.
Right.
That's what we need.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that's why he was chosen.
We need a combat veteran who's gone past fear.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. We need somebody tougher. Rosemarie asks, we are in Ohio, Aurora, and are seeing signs outside of home saying communism is not welcome here. Is this an organized effort that you're aware of?
No, I'm not, but I commend who's ever doing it.
Yeah, truly.
I don't know about it, but good on them for doing it.
Yeah, right. David asks, there will be chaos. We can't stop it with restraint. Okay, that's not a question, that's a statement.
Yes, yes, we can stop it with restraint. Well, we've got to deal with it with restraint. If anybody thinks they're going to be a big hero and go out there with guns blazing, all they're doing is committing suicide for this country.
Yeah.
And that's just idiot talk.
Well, I think that after the election, if they create the chaos they say they are, that Trump will call out the National Guard. And then
look, absolutely. This is not for
overnight.
This is not for civilians to be getting out in the street. You know, I can see a role for marches and support rallies for support for the president, but this has got to be the government doing this stuff because they want a civil war.
Yeah, they do.
They've been trying to provoke one for months now, and I think the American people have been very restrained generally.
Yeah, truly. Okay, Terry, is there a strategy for getting the communist factions to turn on each other? That's always a good idea too.
Yeah, well, there is division in their ranks, and look, if President Trump wins and they're defeated, you'll see the Bernie wing of Democrat Party split. I think you'll see the Democrat Party split. You know, and you'll see probably a third party started that will fizzle out after a short period of time. See, look, I really think if we are resolute and we can hold this, the left is going to splinter and fracture, especially if a lot of their leaders are in jail. Now, you know, I'll give you a couple of examples, and they both go back to 1968. In 68, they had the massive riots in Chicago.
Right.
And 7 of their leaders were put on trial for crossing state lines to start a riot. And 5 of them got 5-year jail terms. The Chicago 7. That stopped the violence.
Yep.
There were still marches and rallies, but there were no more violent incidents after that. Now, the other thing I think is happening, and this goes back to 68 as well. See, in 1968 in Vietnam, American forces had the communists pretty much defeated.
Yeah, they did.
But in early 68, the communists struck back with this massive Tet offensive.
Right.
They threw everything at the Americans. They attacked every military base in the South with wave after wave of little guys in pajamas.
Yep.
And they got slaughtered.
They got slaughtered.
It was a massive military defeat.
Yep.
But it won the war for the North Vietnamese, because it turned American public opinion away from the war.
Well,
it intimidated the Americans. The North Vietnamese had a couple of 2s, and America had 3 aces, and they bluffed you out and took the pot.
Right. And they got
terms.
And they were
right now, the left are doing a Tet offensive.
Yeah, that's right.
They're throwing every single thing they can at you to intimidate you, to dispirit you, fake polls, riots, intimidation, shutting down Facebook, abusing you, attacking your homes, ripping signs off your yards. This is a Tet offensive.
Yes,
and they've got a couple of 2s, and we've got 3 aces. We cannot let them bluff us out this time.
Exactly.
Because it's a bluff. Yeah. And when we call their bluff, they will fold.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And in 68, as now, the reason that succeeded was because the American media made it out to be a success.
Yeah.
And that showed that demonstrated it by the media's account that we were vulnerable, and the revolution, so to speak, was much larger than anybody thought, and we were certain to lose. I mean, Walter Cronkite, the point man for that whole effort, and it was all a total fraud.
Yeah, but that's exactly what's happening now. They're making themselves much more powerful than they are,
Yep.
and diminishing our strength. So people saying, "Oh, let's just give up and give it to them. Let's have some peace. Let's just stop this fighting." Well, they are on the verge of crumbling. They've exposed themselves much more than they wanted to. This was all supposed to be just Hillary Clinton was supposed to win. She was supposed to implement socialism, shut us down, and America would be communist by now.
Yeah.
But Trump walked right into the middle of that. So they've had to go to plan B, which is much more open, much more violent, and the American people are disgusted by it. Well, they just cannot be intimidated.
Yep.
You cannot do what we did in '68.
That's one thing the left always tends to do, is overplay its hand. And that's what they've done here. Ken says, this is wonderful. Thanks to RGA and Trevor for a fabulous session. Mind-blowing. Thanks, Ken. David answers the question of who that person was, and he said it was Miles Guo, friend of Steve Bannon, leader of the federal state of China, the replacement for the CCP.
Look, that is not a trustworthy organization.
No?
Not at all. Don't have anything to do with it.
Are they in communist China?
Yeah, look, Mike Wallace, you've got a legal battle going with them right now. There are people in Texas right now being intimidated by this organization.
Wow.
Look, I'm not saying the tapes aren't genuine. I'm not saying you shouldn't spread them around, but don't have anything to do with that organization.
Thank you. Sherry asks, regardless of the election outcome, will we continue to have these most informative webinars? Well, we'll see. We'll see. That's the best I can say about that for now. Gail asks,
put it this way: had Hillary Clinton been elected in 2016, do you think we'd still be having them out now, Jim?
oh, we'd probably be in jail by now.
I'd say so. So we got to win this.
Yeah, we
You
really
got to get every single one of your friends, every one of your golfing buddies, everybody you've ever talked to, get their name, drag them to the polls. It's not just winning, we got to win so big that the left has no argument.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. Gail asks, if Trump wins, and we assume the left will contest it, what can Trump do to quell it? Well, I think we've kind of answered that, haven't we?
Well, yeah, he's got to crack down on the left in the streets. He's got to put these people in jail where they belong, but he's got to go through. He's got to decapitate the agents, the organs of the government.
Yep.
He's got to set up a new investigative body, as far as I'm concerned, that was fresh people and uncontaminated people.
Yep.
And he's got to get China and Russia out of this country. He's got to close down RT, Al Jazeera, the Chinese, get all Chinese newspaper ownership out of this country, all of it.
Except for
Now, would we allow the Nazis to do what the Chinese are doing in this country in 1939?
Right, exactly.
And we wouldn't. People went to jail. Axis Sally, they were hung for collaborating with the Nazis and the propagandizing Americans during World War II.
Yeah.
Well, we got this happening right now in America, and people are getting not getting hung, they're getting rich.
Yep, that's right. Gail also mentions there's a new documentary on Amazon Prime called Plot Against the President. I have that up. I haven't started looking at it yet, but I get a lot of good reviews about it.
It's called Fight Against the President, is it?
The Plot Against the President.
Oh, the Plot Against the President. Okay.
Yeah. Now there's Sherry says Georgia is now a battleground state. Yep, we agree with that.
Look, all the southern states, you see, the left have poured their resources. This is Steve Phillips. This is Stacey Abrams, Andrew Gillum. The left have poured their resources into the southern states to use the black and Latino populations who lean heavily Democrat but don't normally vote. This is the whole strategy. This is the Rainbow Coalition strategy. That's why I've said we're going to do well in the Midwest. What I'm worried about is Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Florida. That's where I'm more worried.
Do you not think DeSantis is aware of that and working on it? I think he's pretty.
I think DeSantis is to a large degree. I think Florida will be better, but I don't think Brian Kemp knows what he's dealing with in Georgia, and they certainly don't know what they're dealing with in North Carolina or Arizona. So, you know, most of these governors, they know there's something wrong, but they have no. If you told them the communist Chinese were working in Florida to flip the state, that they passed a referendum giving 1.8 million felons to vote. If I said that to the governor of most of these states, they'd look at me like I come from Mars. They'd have no communist. What do you mean? Most people don't understand Black Lives Matter as communist.
Right.
You know, they don't understand. We had a communist president for 8 years under Barack Obama. 90% of Americans still don't know that. We had a communist president in Bill Clinton. You know, 95% of Americans have no idea.
Yeah, that's right. Did that referendum pass in Florida to get
Legalized 1.4 million felons in Florida.
And
it was organized by Liberation Road, the same pro-Chinese communist group that backed Andrew Gillum and raised the Democratic Party vote by 40% in 2018. And only because DeSantis was so good and so tough and raised the Republican vote by about 41% that he pulled out a victory. But he's done very well. He's popular in the state, and I think that will help to carry the state for Trump.
Okay. Flo says, regarding education, get involved with Truth in Texas textbooks. We've talked about that in the past. They're great. And that's a very good organization to get involved.
Roy White does a great job on that.
Yep.
See, this is something we've got to deal with too. See, in Florida, I live in a very conservative part of Florida, and I look at my kids' textbooks, and they're pure communism. Because what happens is there's a board in Florida, so a school district can choose any textbook they like, as long as it's approved by the textbook board. So who runs the textbook board?
It's your communists.
It's the communists run it. So you've got to get rid of the textbook board. And this is the same all over the country.
June asks, would you say that the chaos after the election will be spread all across America or pretty much stay in the Northwest?
No, it's going to be all over.
That'll be all over. Thank you, Sherry says. Any thoughts on the global reset?
Well, that's going to be the big push to socialism. And if Biden is the president, I think it'll go pretty well. We'll get the Paris Accords back. We'll get everything all back that Obama was doing. We'll be pushed well down the road to socialism. If Trump's the president, I think the reset will not achieve what it wants to achieve. Put it that way.
Oh, let's see. Terry asks, and this is a kind of a confusing question, why do we conservatives write exposés while the leftists write plans which create more opportunities for conservatives to write more exposés?
Well, that's a very good point, because we are on the defensive all the time. They come up with a plan and we expose the plan, and some people do a little bit about the plan, and maybe the plan gets slowed down a little bit. We think it's a victory when we stop 10% of a look. We have to go on the offensive, and this is what Trump wants to do. He wants to take down the Communist Party of China. He wants to form an anti-communist alliance around the world. Look, if he does that, we can put the dictators on the back foot and get them out of power for decades. But we can't be thinking of containing the Communist Party of China. We've got to be thinking about ending the Communist Party of China and the Communist Party USA and Democratic Socialist of America and all these treasonous operations working in our country. It's a great point the person made. They make plans, we write exposés. Well, so Hitler has a plan to invade Europe, so we write an expose about it. you know, which is great, but we got to, American boys still had to pick up guns and go and sort the mess out and annihilate Hitler, did they not?
Right. Yep. Well, he agreed that more aggressive, offensive actions like you described were what is needed. So, last question. Jay asked, do you envision a food chain disruption post-election?
Yeah, I do. So I'd be stocking up your freezers. Look, I can see things happening like a complete shutdown of electricity in some states. I can see the internet might go down for days at a time. Twitter, Facebook, all suspended. There's a scenario out there that Trump wins, but nobody knows he's won because nobody can get any news.
Right.
The Chinese are already working on shutting down our media systems and our electricity grid. We got to understand this is war.
Yeah.
This is total. We are at war with China now. Nothing is off the table. So stock up your freezer, but get a generator too, because it's no good having a full freezer if there's no electricity to run it.
Right.
We prepare for the worst, hope for the best, work for the best. None of this has to happen the way it's been planned to happen, but unless there's resolute action by the government, it will happen. And we got to be prepared for it. We got to be prepared to back the president. We got to show a lot of restraint and be very disciplined and very focused and support each other in our communities, keep the communication lines going, develop new communication lines that don't depend on the internet. Phone lines, smoke signals, whatever it takes.
Yeah. Walkie-talkies.
Ham radio.
Ham radio. Yep.
All of it.
Yep. Well, Trev, this has been fantastic. We had a large number of participants, and as you heard, we got a lot of really good feedback. This is just fantastic. It will be available. We did record it. It will be available in a few days. And whoever's listening should take this and spread it like wildfire as far as you can. Give it to all your contacts. Send it to your representatives. Hold kitchen or living room sessions with your friends and show it over and over again. We really need to win this one. This really is our last chance to save our country. And Ann says, wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Ann. And everybody, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Dan. Thanks to everybody else who was listening. I painted a pretty dark picture here tonight because we've got to understand we are at war.
Yeah.
But when we understand we're at war, we can win.
Yeah.
America's come through a lot of crises before, and when Americans wanted to win a war, they go out and they win. Well, we're fighting in our own soil now, and we got to win this electorally so we don't have to try and win any other way.
That's right.
And that's what we got to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you all. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. Thank you all for your comments and questions. We're getting a bunch more people saying thank you. Mike says thanks, Trevor, Jim, and Dan, outstanding. And we are working hard to win. Yep. And thank you especially to Trevor. And so to all of you folks, well, be sure to get out there and vote. Get everybody you know out there to vote, and then steel your gird for what's coming.
Yeah. Remember the power of prayer, everybody. With that, we'll say good night.
Absolutely.
All right. Good night. Thanks, Trevor.
Good night. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all listening. And let's just get out there and win this thing, shall we?
No, that's right.
So, let's do it.
Okay.